can. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. So I make you a co-host, you can share the PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to point the computer at going down to the board chair.
Okay.
And then I'll let him start the working session.
I suppose for the start here, there's no point in having the mics on because we're going to just listen to the presentation. Okay, it is 6:04 and we'll call the working session to order. And looks like citizens forum, got anyone? And I think we'll go right into our board audit, or the audit report.
All right, so we're set to go. Can you see the audit presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm Nancy Schultzenberg, and I was the engagement partner on the audit this year. So happy to be presenting to you as a board for the first time. And what I've done is taken some highlights out of the financial statements and the communication letter to put them in this presentation for ease of discussion. So I want to start out tonight talking about all of the communications that we issue as part of the audit. And the most important communication is going to be in our independent auditor's report. And you can find this letter in its entirety in the front of the financial statement document. But in summary, we're issuing an unmodified opinion on the district's basic financial statements, which is an indication that those financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects based on the results of the audit. So the year-ending balances and also the activity for the year ended June 30th, 2023. So that is a clean opinion, if you will, and the best that we as your auditors can offer. And then in addition to that independent auditor's report, we have a few other communications. And the first one is our report related to government auditing standards. So government auditing standards are required for all school districts in the state of Minnesota, and they require us as auditors to look closer at internal control and also compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants. And based on our work in accordance with those standards, we do have one internal control finding. It is the lack of segregation of accounting duties. Not at all uncommon for a district your size, and even all districts across the state, we see this very commonly. Not something that it may be cost effective and practical for you to correct, but is something that as a board you need to remain aware of. And then I just want to note that we did not have any compliance findings as it relates to those standards. And then our last official letter is our report related to Minnesota legal compliance. On an annual basis, the Office of the State Auditor provides us a checklist, and it covers 7 broad categories of legal compliance. So we test those items, and based on that, we did have 2 findings this year. The first one relates to the late submission of the financial information to the state of Minnesota that happened after the November 30th deadline. We did get it in time to meet the second deadline by the state. And then the other finding relates to some coding, some UFRS coding differences that we found as we went through some of the procedures. And again, all things materially corrected at the end of the day. And then we have a communication letter, which is a separate document, and in there is financial analysis, which I will cover tonight. A section titled Required Communication. So these are things that our standards require that we put in writing to you as the governing body for the school district. And it would be our tool if we had any difficulties, disagreements, anything significant uncovered. We would put that all there. Happy to say that none of it in there strays from our standard language. And then in the back, we have emerging issues related to new GASB standards and also a legislative summary related to the last session. So some of the up and coming changes in revenues and those items from the state. And moving then to financial analysis, general education aid is your largest funding source. So important to understand the components of the calculation of that aid. So starting with the formula allowance. And what you have here is a chart that takes us back 10 years and then looks forward to 2024 as well. And you can see through 2023, the average has been 2% increase annually, and then 2024, you are expecting 4%, and that will go back down to 2% right now as planned for 2025. And then the other part of the calculation of general education aid are your students. So we do have several charts and graphs to take a look at those numbers, starting with the charts on this page. First of all, the top part that has all the detail, those are your residents. So those are the students that live within your boundaries that attend a public school. And you can see relatively stable over the 5 years, a bit of a decrease in 2023, down about 2.6%. And then right below the total residents, so the very bottom line of the chart is your total adjusted ADM. And the difference here is open enrollment is factored into that calculation. So a similar decrease in that number compared to the residents, down about 11 or 2.5%. And we have that same information on the next slide in graphical format. We like to present it both ways. People see things differently. So I think taking away from this chart, you can see, again, that relative stability of your students with a bit of a decrease in 2021, a little bit of an increase in 2022, and then again, those decreases in 2023. And when we actually calculate general education aid, we take those adjusted ADMs and weight them by grade level. With everybody receiving 1.0 with the exception of secondary getting 20% more at 1.2. So the chart here shows your resident PUM or adjusted or weighted. We used to call them WADMs, now they call them PUN. So you can see that number did decrease, down about 19 between 2022 and 2023. And then we factor in open enrollment. So your resident students going elsewhere has been very, very flat for the last 5 years and identical between 22 and 23. And your non-resident PUN increased back to the level that it was at in 2021. So the difference there, you had a net loss of 15 in 2022 and a net loss of 12 in 2023, allowing for that overall adjusted number to decrease by just 12 versus the 19 that decrease that you saw in your residents. So that's about 2.4%. And again, similar information in a graphical format, segregating between your residents that are served and then those non-residents on the top there in the green. Moving then to some actual dollar amounts, we have a chart that takes a look at your general fund sources of revenue. And again, we plot this over 5 years. Pretty consistent when you look back 5 years to where you were for 2023. If we compare 2022 to 2023, you'll see a decrease of about 3.1% or 219,000. And then among the categories, there also were some variances. So your local property taxes there on top, that did decrease about 87,000 related to the change in the levy for the general fund. State revenues in the middle, actually up about 271,000. Part of that had to do with the increase in that formula allowance offset by that decrease in students and then increases in special education aid. And then the other revenues is where the largest variance came in, and that is an amount that includes your local sources and also your federal sources. So the biggest change there, it's down about 402,000 overall, and that's related to those COVID funds. So more of those being spent in 2022 versus 2023. We have a pie chart that takes a look at your revenues as a percentage of the whole, and you can see the heavy reliance that you have on those state sources, making up 70% of the total. Local property taxes 20%, and then the other revenues making up just 10%. The next chart looks at your revenues per student. It gives us the ability to compare your district with districts across the state of Minnesota. So the top portion is Lake of the Woods, and you can see annual increases through 2021, and then it decreases each of the last 2 years with that decrease in enrollment along with the decrease in revenues. When we look at your district compared to statewide averages, you have consistently and continue to be above those state averages. We don't have those yet for 2023, but we have seen a lot more increases in revenues, so you might be a bit closer to that state average when we look at this next year. We have an expenditure pie chart. So overall, expenditures were actually up for 2023, up about 4.5% or 330,000, primarily related to salaries and the related benefits. When we look at this pie chart and we look at where the district is spending its money, you can see those direct instructional categories are making up the majority. Special education, vocational instruction, and regular instruction make up about 68% of the total. Like I mentioned, we don't have averages statewide for 2023, but I did look back to 2022, and the average for direct instruction was 63% across the state. So residing just above that number. And then I also looked at your school and district administration being at 4%. Overall state average last year was 5%, so a bit below when we look at that percentage. Next, we have your budget to actual chart. So if you look at the very bottom line, there was not an amendment to the budget in 2023, so you had anticipated a decrease of about $148,000. Fund balance went down just under $1.2 million. And then the far right is your variance, so a variance of over $1 million for the year. And when we follow that variance column up, total revenue is pretty close to what you had anticipated overall, under about $96,000. That's 1.4%. And the largest difference coming in that state sources, just with a larger decrease in the student count than you had anticipated with the budget. Did you have a question? Oh, that was a talk fast. All right, so then when we look at the expenditure side of things, expenditures were actually over budget about 10.7%. Two categories contributing to that in a bigger way. First of all, your elementary and secondary regular instruction over by $209,000. Part of that related to some planned reductions that did not occur in 2023. Part of it had to do with some increased sub costs, and then also some other areas that had miscellaneous increases across the board. The other category with a pretty sizable variance is your pupil support services. That was over budget about $176,000 related to a fuel tank project that occurred in 2023, and then also increased fuel costs. And when we look at the other financing sources there, that is transfers, net transfers in, offset by a small FEMA amount that came in during the year. So that is over budget by about $212,000, and that's related to increased transfers to the community service fund for the pool project and the pool costs. We have expenditures per student, so similarly to your revenues, you are above statewide averages, and it did increase this year, along with that increase in your expenditures offset by the decrease in your students. So kind of heightening that increase on a per student basis. This chart shows you a very high level look at your general fund for each of the last 5 years. So if we take a look at the 2023 column on the far right there, we talked about that decrease in revenues and the increase in expenditures, the other financing use. You did have a prior period adjustment that was reported for the year, and that related to a negative benefit payable that was recorded in past years that was not correct. So that was corrected this year. So overall, your ending fund balance decreased to about $837,000. The bottom portion of this chart outlines all of the components of your fund balance. So the non-spendable, those are items for prepaid expenditures that were purchased in 2023, will be used in 2024. So set aside and segregated there. And then we have the restriction reserved amounts. Those are all state mandated. That totaled about $748,000. You do have a consistent $170,000 committed for those separation retirement benefits. There is an assignment of just under $32,000, and that leaves you with the unassigned number, which dipped into a deficit this year of $131,000. So that is the lowest fund balance and the lowest unassigned number that you've seen over the last 5 years. And then one last look at the general fund, taking a look at your unrestricted fund balance as a percentage of unrestricted expenditures. So this chart includes the non-spendable, the committed, the assigned, and the unassigned. So it's different than that negative that you saw on the previous page. And it did fall to 2.1%, down from 19.1% last year. And if we look at the chart over the 5 years, in 2019, 2020, and 2021, you had resided above state averages. You fell below that just a bit in 2022 and then further below in 2023. Just two more slides. First of all, taking a look at your food service fund. A bit of a change in activity in the food service fund this year with the return to the regular free and reduced programming. You had received free meals for all students in 2022 at a higher reimbursement rate. So you see a pretty significant, about 14% drop in your revenues. Expenditures were actually up about 8.4%. Part of that was some capital items that were purchased, and then also increased food costs with the inflation that we experienced during the year. Still maintaining a positive operational year, increasing fund balance by about $3,300 and ending at $141,000. And then finally, we have your community service fund. Revenue is pretty consistent, up $9,800. Expenditures, a big drop there, about $207,000 related to the pool project that occurred in 2022. So that was a one-time item. Then we have the other financing sources coming in. Those are the transfers from the general fund, a much larger amount in 2023, leaving you with a deficit of $191,000, which was an improvement from the deficit that you were in last year. And then the bottom portion of the chart outlines the categories of fund balance as mandated by the state. Your community education and also your school readiness program were in a deficit at the end of the year, which has been consistently there since 2021 for both of those programs. And that is where my presentation stops, but happy to take any questions that you might have.
Just catching my breath. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, you speak, you're the first, this is the first time we're going through this with you there. You speak quickly. My mind moves slowly, so I have to arrange things. And you seem very comfortable when you're talking about school finance, so I'm assuming you've done this for quite a while?
Yep, 30 years.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Several things I wanted to ask about. We always have that on our audit, but you say it's not unusual for a school your size. The checks and balances effectively, How do other schools in our size range address that problem, or do you just effectively point it out every time in an audit, but understand that there are a minimal number of people who are going to be looking over each other's shoulders?
Right. And I think, as auditors, we have three buckets to put our findings. The first one, material weakness, which is where your lack of segregation of accounting duties lies. And then we have significant deficiencies and other deficiencies, which are lesser. So material weakness, in my mind, it's there, it exists, and you're a small school, and it's probably not cost effective to hire a bunch more people to operate that, but does warrant additional attention then by you as the board. So when you're looking over financial information, making sure that you're keeping an eye on what's going on from that perspective. But again, I'm not going to sit here today and say you should fix that, because you probably can't fix that without hiring several more people, but just something to remain aware of.
Okay, so my question threw the answer back in my own lap, so I appreciate that. In your pie chart where you were just referencing how the 70% of state of our funding is coming from state levels, there you go, that's state revenues. Yep. That's something I've learned over the last year or two. That percentage, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that percentage changes based on what our local tax base is capable of providing. So the state's at 70%, is that a large number or a small number in terms of what other schools see in terms of how much state revenue they get?
Yeah, we see a lot in the 70% range. We do see some that are even a higher percentage than where you're at, in the mid 70s. I think the lowest I've ever seen is like 59%, and that was in a very high property tax district and a lot of federal funds. So, when you look at this, it's hard because there's so many components that go into each individual district's revenues. But this just gives you kind of an overall, your district is really reliant on what's going on in the state of Minnesota at 70%.
Okay. I mean, we've expanded our tax base a little bit over the last few years, And,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where that came up. It didn't increase, obviously what we were getting for funding, it just decreased what the state was contributing.
Well, it's more of a shift in the pie. It's not necessarily that the state is contributing less, because you still get that same basic formula allowance. And, you have special education needs, so you get reimbursement at, a certain percentage related to that. But it becomes a smaller piece of the pie when your local property taxes increase. So theoretically, it would give you overall increased revenues.
Right. So, from a school board perspective, we can be excited about the fact we're selling properties at a higher level and that, we're getting power transmission lines through here. But financially, it's not really doing anything for us. It's just benefiting the community up here in general.
Yes. Yeah, because the revenue, the operating referendum, if you have that, that's an add-on, but the rest of it is really very formula driven as far as what you can levy for each component of the levy. So that you don't have a lot of say over what happens and how much that can be. So it just spreads it differently. So if you have a larger tax base, it spreads your levy over more dollars. So it's not like a city where they set a rate. It's an amount. Your district is allowed to levy this much, and it's spread differently. Does that make sense?
Vaguely.
Okay.
But you gotta let it digest. But I guess what I'm getting at in that respect is that just after 30 years of doing this, is when you look at, okay, Lake of the Woods is maybe increasing their tax capabilities, but since we're not in a school basis getting really any more, is it time for us to turn to the community and ask them for something on a referendum basis? And I think that's something we're mulling over right now.
Yeah, and I think when you look at this chart, it may be time, because you're going to have to do something to improve that fund balance so that you don't end up in statutory operating debt.
Yeah, well, that brings me to one of my other observations. Was you were noticeably calm as you went through that part of the chart. So I appreciate that. It's normal for school districts to flirt with this fund balance issue. This has been a fairly precipitous year for us. We got a couple of big issues going, in terms of building needs, that type of thing, and we're spending money
Sure.
quite rapidly. But do you see, is that how school districts react? We get close and then you claw your way out of it right now, which is kind of what I'm looking at.
Well, I remain calm because I have to be the independent auditor, so I have to try and keep the, my opinion out of it. But I do not see on a consistent basis decreases like what you've experienced in the last couple of years. I have a couple of other districts that are seeing the same thing. Those COVID dollars were spent in different ways at different districts for different things. So that can really affect what happens to your fund balance in these years. And also going forward, how much money is left? Is there anything that's going to help soften 2024? Or are you done using it? All of those things. Again, so many variables. But this is a big decrease, going from 35.3% just 2 years ago down to 2.1. Definitely something to keep your eye on and work toward sending it back up in the other direction. Because once you get to a negative 2.5%, then you're in statutory operating debt. And then the state comes in and has a lot of requirements about a very specific plan to get you out of that situation.
And when you have student expenditures that are what I'm looking at significantly above state average, is that just, again, a reflection of we have the ability to put 600 and some kids into this building, but we only have 460 kids to put in this building, or 440 kids, or whatever the year number is? Is that what, we got to shrink that number in terms of what we're spending on our kids?
It's hard in a very small district to shrink that number. Smaller districts, if we took a size, the state used to have these really nice charts that would give us by size, by, like enrollment numbers, so you could compare yourself. Smaller districts have a higher per student cost just because you have those costs that are there, that are standard, that you can spread over fewer students.
It's kind of the economies of scale sort of thing,
Yes.
like the kids.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, I appreciate the answers, and like I say, I appreciate
Sure.
the logic to it. It sounds like you've been around it a lot. Appreciate you
Yeah, I have.
answering them honestly, so, but anybody else has something they want to?
I've got one question, and you may or may not be able to answer it. Could you go back to the one that had the revenues, and it was the local revenue? Not the pie chart, it was,
This one.
Nope, not.
For the actual dollar amounts.
Don't bother, don't go for the per, yeah, that one.
Okay.
Cause like Tim had just pointed out that the taxation's been going up, but we had I mean, there was a $90,000 almost, well, $87,000 drop in local tax levies.
Yeah, so the property tax amount for a school district is calculating using a 30-plus page formula. So there are different components that you are allowed to levy for. Some of them are per student, some of them are based on costs that you might have, some of them are based on your long-term facility maintenance plan. Operating capital is based on a lot of things, including the age of your buildings. So there's a lot of variables that goes into that, but really it's a set amount. And then you can levy up to the maximum of whatever that formula comes out to be. So you can increase your tax base, increase your values, but it doesn't increase your dollars. It just spreads those over. It reduces the amount for your taxpayer.
Okay.
Now, if you have an operating referendum that's approved by your taxpayers, that's on that would increase your levy overall.
I'm not tracking either. I figured I'd ping on Sheena afterwards.
It's a tough one because if you're familiar with government and you go to a city, they set a tax rate at whatever, and that's what their levy is. So if they have a higher tax base, they get a higher dollar amount. Your levy is a dollar amount based on this formula. So a higher tax base, a higher value in property doesn't get you any more money on the calculated formula. But if you have an operating referendum, that's on a per student basis, that directly increases that dollar amount.
Okay.
Again, it doesn't increase based on your values, it just spreads it differently.
Okay.
At least in school districts, it's super complicated.
Anyone else? Hearing none, I guess. Oh, wait, we have one more. Turn on your mic real quick there, Lynn.
So I'm assuming that the other revenue also factors into that total that we can get, or does it?
I missed the middle part of that question.
I'm sorry. Does the other revenue factor into that,
factor into
the formula,
the
or
formula
the
for what?
total?
The other revenues, does that?
No, the other revenues are things like your local revenues. So if you have amounts coming in for fundraising and participation fees, those types of things, includes federal money. So COVID is the big driver in the increase for 2022 and then dropping back for 2023 because you spent less. Investment earnings are included in that number. So those are really variable year to year. But it's not a formula-driven number.
Into the levies at all, the state revenue
No.
or the local?
No, those are all in the top line.
Anyone else?
Well, the only thing, I mean, when you look at it, we're bringing in less revenue than we did pre-COVID.
Yeah, that's the ultimate. And I think it comes down to we have fewer kids.
Right.
That's seems to me the biggest factor is you have fewer kids. So, I guess, would you say that's an accurate assessment?
Yeah, it is. Yep.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice? Okay. I guess thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you.
I was charged. No.
Here, move it over this way a little bit. There you go.
Yeah, shift it that way. All right, everyone get your mics on and we'll go in with the board committee reports. I guess we'll start with Forrest. Anything to report?
Yeah, really, the trails are groomed at the moment. We got enough snow to do that. So if people are interested in getting out and actually doing something, I think the weather is conducive to it. So that is ready, and we haven't picked a date for the ski yet.
Yep,
What was the date?
February 21st
February 21st?
is a Wednesday. Double check. Yep, from 4 to 6. And we'll get promotions out for that here in February, I guess.
Okay. What are the committee other than finance? Sheena. So,
Buildings and grounds. But, and I will touch on it
Okay.
in my report, and maybe Seth can speak to it a little bit, but
any other committees meet? I think that's all of them basically,
I think
or
so,
all the ones that could have met. So in that case, we'll segue nicely into Superintendent Jeff Nelson's report.
so I'll start off with the enrollment. We're still at 434, that's K-12, so there's no change. I did send some updates on our FY24 budget that Sheena has been working with Todd on. And I'll let her talk a little bit about that. But we need to plan for some deficit reductions for this current fiscal year as well as next year. I think the outcome is going to continue on the trend that we saw prior to COVID, and even last year when we were talking about some budget reductions. I think that trend is continuing with declining enrollment and some expenses that we need to take care of. Before we leave today, I would like to, the plan is during the week of January 29th through February 2nd, I believe, we'll be working with Todd Netsky and Sheena to review the end of the year reports and update our projection model. The frontline projection model that we have been using, we have some concerns with some of the information that we've been using, but we want to make sure that the new program that we're using, that we have the right data put in, so that when we look at making decisions that we need to make cuts, that we're making enough cuts to balance the budget. When we look at our predicament, there's lots of things we can point at and lay blame to, if that's what we need to do. But there's so many different things that kind of contributed to where we are where we're at now. I don't think there's just one major thing. We had some unfortunate expenditures, the fuel tank, we had increases in fuel that, it's hard to plan for. We had the misunderstanding of the line taxes and how that applies. And as the auditor reiterated, those dollars were not meant for the school. They were meant to spread out the tax burden on the taxpayers, is basically what that extra tax went to. Some of it does increase our revenue, but not to what we thought it would be. So we'll be working, I'll be gone the rest of this week after tomorrow, but February 29th through that February 2nd, we'll be working on that. And I asked Todd to come up with some dates, and we're looking the week of February 5th through the 9th that we would actually schedule a special school board workshop on our finances, where we can discuss our current fiscal year budget and kind of where we anticipate we will be come spring. I know it's a scary word to say, the SOD. I'm anticipating that come spring will be in SOD. We are looking at making some cuts this current year, but when we're already at a negative 131 unassigned fund balance, I anticipate and planning and working on the assumption that we're going to be in SOD. I've started to gather information on that. I will be reaching out to MDE. By statute, it's actually June 30th of FY24 where we'd officially be in SOD, but I don't want to wait till June 30th. I want to start putting in the planning and the process that they have for districts that are in that financial. And I think if there's a miracle, I don't always brush those aside, that we end up not in SOD. I think the process with SOD and working with MDE, you don't like to do it, but I think it's a good learning experience, and it strengthens your fiscal responsibility as a school district moving forward. So it's not always, sometimes the toughest lessons and things, when you come through the end, you're stronger and better for it, and that's how I'm approaching this. So I'd like to get some dates from the board during the week of February 5th to the 9th where we could set that. And we need at least 3 days to post. I'd like to post it sooner because it would be open to the public. At a workshop, it's more kind of how we do our working session. There's not a lot of input from the public. It's more of gathering information for you and answering questions and going through that process. When we start working on some cuts that we will have to make, and we will have to make cuts to get through this year and for sure for next year to get back on track. Some of the cuts won't be as painful as others, but we'll get through it together. One major concern is our cash flow. With a negative $130,000 deficit right now in our unassigned, and we are very close to ratifying all 3 unions contracts. So there'll be some retro pay for those people. One concern is maintaining cash flow to pay your bills and pay your employees. We've been working with Border Bank and Baudette here to open a line of credit. By statute, we are limited to 95% of our general fund average monthly operating expenses, which calculates to $706,545. In the resolution in front of you, we put a line of credit of $700,000. Just like anything else with credit, we'd only access it in emergency situations. And then we would need to have it paid in 45 days. In the agreement right now, we would close the line of credit on June 30th, 2024, where by then we'll reassess where we're at. And if we need to continue with additional line of credits after that for the next fiscal year, we can address that at that time.
What date did you say?
The June 30th, end of the fiscal year would be the end of the line of credit.
Okay, and by that point, we should have most of the money from taxes and such?
Yep.
Or?
Well, then the following year, you start getting your, collecting your taxes in May. The state aid comes. It's in June.
So that would be good timing, so it would be good to take it out
Yep.
then, and everything should work out.
We shouldn't have to take it out in June, because we should have those flow of dollars. It's between now and June where the
That's what I'm
flow,
saying, get
yes.
it now, and the end of it works out nicely, that we should
Yep.
have the money coming in
Yep.
to that, and so it won't be an issue.
Yep, and we're looking at, and we'll get more information when we meet again, the fund balances, the restricted funds that are listed up there. There's probably $300,000-400,000 that we could probably use now for expenditures rather than carry that fund balance like When you're sitting good financially, having fund balance is a good thing. When you're struggling financially, using those reserves to meet your budget is kind of how we do that. So any questions on any of those?
Do you have a copy of the resolution? Do we have a copy of the resolution?
I will make copies. They weren't in the board packet.
They aren't in the board unless they're in the,
Okay,
Unless they got.
I will, when I'm done with my report, I think that got missed when we,
because it was an
They're not
add
on-
to the agenda.
yes, but it's not in your papers in front of you.
Oh,
Okay. All right.
It's not in the crib sheet or.
Yep, I will get a copy of the resolution. I apologize that
Yeah,
didn't get.
we got, I think the last thing in our packets was actually through the resignations.
The
There was
Kathy
that.
Weemans was the last thing.
And
in
then
the
we
board
don't
packet.
have the final audit report, the resolution, or the.
Really?
Just have the preliminary audit report
Okay.
that we sent.
So,
Okay.
And I believe the preliminary probably matched the final.
Yes, and all I have is the preliminary, because they have to run it through their quality control.
Yeah. That was what I
So
was thinking.
what I have has preliminary on there. I don't think it's gonna change much, but they're not willing to take that off there until they run it through. Yeah.
And, I mean, I have maybe you just sent it to the finance committee.
No, everyone has it.
I think it's on the drive, but
I
I
mean, I know
don't
I
think
saw
it
it.
was included in the packet that was mailed out. So you can
I
access
think
it
it is.
electronically. Is it?
I believe it is.
The
Yeah.
preliminary one should be in
The
the,
preliminary one is in there. It's most of the,
in the working
in
session.
the working session.
oh,
Yeah.
Yep.
Not in
Okay.
the board, but not,
All right.
but in
Yep.
the working.
but the
session.
resolution is not in the, okay, that,
Correct.
all right, okay.
There's 2 resolutions for approval and neither are in the board packet.
Okay,
That I have found.
I will, we'll get copies for you to look at before you vote on it. Fair enough?
That would be good.
Okay.
So this one's not in there either.
Maybe I'll let Seth, he's not on the agenda, but we'll add him. He can talk about the update on the daycare, the fire marshal issue. When he comes up, I would just say thanks to Seth for working so hard to gather people, like some people at social services and Rotary, try to cover the cost so we can get up to code and change from a school to whatever the code is so that we can continue to have daycares. And we've had one person that's been kind of chomping at the bit to get going with her daycare and parents wanting it, and we just haven't been able to move forward with that. So we're going to use some of our reserved safe school funds to finance it, and then we'll get reimbursed by the public. But I'll let him do that. I'll let him talk about the update on staffing with his resignation, and kind of what the plan is to cover that for the interim, and then reassess in the spring whether we need to continue with what we're doing with the interim, if it's working, or if we need to fill the position. We are going to add or put out a job ad for the position, intending to review and hire this spring, if that's the choice of the board, with the starting in July with that position. Also, before I, excuse me, also, okay, I owe you a bottle of water.
Seven have an extra.
Thank you. Also, with that said, and looking down the road with adjusting some positions for some potential cost savings, I'm recommending that we look at appointing Ms. Merchant as a K-12 principal for the remainder of this school year. And we've met and talked about it. There's a number of other things down the road that will impact this, but I think with Seth leaving and trying to fill those shoes a little bit, and looking down the road, I think this would be a good opportunity to start moving towards a K-12 principal with our school, possibly with some support, whether it's a dean of student or some kind of support for student behaviors in place with that. So our plan is to move that unless the board feels that's not the right time to do that. Any questions on that?
That would just be trial basis, correct?
Trial basis, and then looking at if it works, you know, there's some ripple effect to this as far as potential cost savings with administration cost is the bottom line, what we're looking at, and restructuring some positions to make sure that classroom teachers and student needs are met in a more efficient manner, I guess is what we're looking at. So we'll try it till this spring, and if it's working, because more pieces to the puzzle will come into play as we move forward too.
Do you have a way to get feedback from teachers or those most impacted, I guess? Or have you thought about that, I guess, maybe?
Yeah. Yep, I'm sure we'll get input from staff. We can, I mean, when we start probably end of February, early March, actually getting to specific reductions and changes, we'll have input from staff and the public. Update on negotiations. We have tentative agreements with all 3 unions. And I believe the teachers group has voted to approve, and we're cleaning up and getting a final copy to bring to the board in February. MSE and AFSCME are scheduled to vote in the near future. So probably at our February board meeting we'll be approving those, or asking you to approve those contracts. My schedule was in my report that I sent out. Just a heads up, the perfect storm this week is I'm out for family medical. Mr. Borgen is going to be out for some family medical, and Miss Merchant is out for her conference. So all 3 of us are going to be gone Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but we have our activities director, community ed, who will be in that role on those 3 days. She'll have a lifeline to us with cell phones. And we do have a backup, so if kids are having issues, we have someone we can pull out to give her some assistance, so it'll be fine.
Try to say SWAT teams on call or
It's
something.
gonna be the most fun 3 days that these kids have ever seen.
And you're in a perfect spot, you got the
We're
triangulation,
playing
just,
games,
yeah.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah.
They're never gonna want these 3 to come back.
Watch out what you wish for.
Yeah.
So that's my report, unless there's any questions. And I apologize for some of the missing stuff in the packet, but I will run and get those printed off and hand that out to everyone.
All right, I guess while Mr. Nelson is doing that, we'll hear from high school principal, Mary Merchant.
Good evening. I was going to say I'll be brief, but maybe Jeff wants me to buy some time here. Our in-service on January 15th, full busy day for everybody K-12. We had a Stop the Bleed training which is a wonderful hands-on experience for the staff. And it was Jared Hahn came in and was our lead man there to do that with the teachers. We're looking down the road, and when I say that, I mean when we have other full-time in service of also looking at AED and first aid. It's probably going to be refresher because we had conversation about doing full course, and if there is enough interest for those that, like I've had the refresher, but I know mine's expired, so I don't know if we have to do the full course for, if we really want to be certified, or just to have that experience to update us. So we'll determine that once we look at next school year and the in-service days that we have. First semester ended on Friday, so teachers will have grades in by tomorrow and then ready for parents to access on Wednesday. And as Jeff mentioned, I take off on Wednesday for the high school principals winter conference. And busy day, which Sam will probably talk about with our one act today.
Oh, I'm actually not on the docket, but you can say something.
Oh, okay, so one act competition today, and I always think it's wonderful when people come into our building. So the competition was in the building, which typically is a Saturday, and I will say with school in full session, from my end of things, it went very well, especially when they were arriving and we had lunch going on and everything. So Sam did an excellent job of coordinating everything that needed to be, and use of the locker rooms, and you name the nooks and crannies that we could find for our visiting schools to be able to, you know, kind of camp out in, was a very smooth day. And then career and college planning with the kids, scholarship information, when I get it, I forward it to the students on a regular basis, which is always once a week. Lately, I think it's been twice a week. And then it's just been individual meetings with students. Diane and I have already put and polished and started to tweak a schedule for next year, and online registering with our high school kids went so well. We'll look at doing that format again this year, and going from there. Do you have any questions for me? Okay, thank you.
Very much. We'll hear from the business office then. Gina.
So we did complete a frontline data upload again after we were having some issues last month. I had a frontline rep basically delete all our data and then re-upload everything. And after we went through the reports, they're still not correct. So once I finished the December month end, which was on Thursday, I uploaded the data and then ran all the monthly reports. And our UFAR's expense revenue summary comes from finance. So this is exactly what is showing up in our books for expenses, revenues, everything once the month is posted and I balance to zero and complete the bank reconciliation. It's not matching our frontline data still. And the reason why I know that is when we look at page 5, it shows our projected year end, our year total, and then the June 30th projection. They're not even close. So right now it's showing that we have a deficit of $868,269, and that's not what our deficit currently is. So based on Smart Finance, our current deficit is $621,180.48. So with that being said, we are planning to transition away from frontline. I can work with our reps again to show that it's wrong, and that and also looking at our fund balances, our year end is still wrong. Even it's the year end fiscal year 2023 is wrong, and then even the starting balances for 2024. So they'll have to correct that. We are looking to move away from frontline. So I met with Todd last week And then I also have I had a meeting today, and I have another meeting tomorrow. We are transitioning to a new Excel file where I complete monthly uploads. So we actually got our revenues all revised last week, and now we're working on our expenditures. So we'll be working on that. I sent him our December data, and he was able to import that today. He hasn't shared it with me yet. But the plan was to meet at 2 o'clock today, and then he wasn't able to meet at 2. So we should be able to get that all completed tomorrow. And I feel that this is going to be a much better tool moving forward, and it will be a cost savings for the district too. So once I get that new data file with December uploaded, I will share it with everyone. After reviewing our audit, we did find our expenditures have been understated the last 3 years. So
Under budgeted, you mean?
Sorry, under budgeted. So what happens is, you know, when I came in and did the budget, I bumped it up 3%. That still wasn't enough. It should have been more like 6%, 7%. So looking at a deficit of over $1 million from last year is very concerning. Revenues were very close, but we really need to, like Jeff said, get the expenditures under control. So we're going to revise the budget, see where we're at. We're going to adjust things that, you know, have came up or occurred within this year, and then we'll share that and we'll work on it. We did have a meeting last week concerning our cash on hand, and especially with retros coming up. Jill and I are just keeping an eye on bills and payments and just making sure we have enough cash to cover everything. I did complete our title draw for Q1 and Q2. I also completed our draw for our REAP grant, so we have another $40,000 that we were able to pull in. We have, you know, very small funds available for the ESSER Grant 160, so we have $641.76. We were able to pull some of that for Q1 and Q2, and then finance 161 also. We have $166.44. So not enough money to worry about all the accounting that's involved in it, in all reality. And then our farm to school grant, we have $2,500 left to spend, and our last draw will be completed at the end of March. So looking at the monthly budget report that I provided, the numbers are not fully accurate. I'm not trusting it since the frontline data is not matching, but I did indicate where our state revenues are at, 36%. Federal revenues, 122% received. That is not correct. And keep in mind the federal revenues does include food service also, which is significantly higher too. Property taxes, 28% received. Local revenues, 37% received. Food service, 29% received. That is accurate. Community education, 11% received. That is accurate. Looking over our expenditures, salaries and wages are running slightly higher at 42%. We do need to make some adjustments. Employees' benefits are showing up 28% expended, 38% expended. They're actually running lower than that. Last year they were very high just because we did find that insurance error, which we did write off. But this year we're showing under budget, which is good because we haven't yet finished the retro negotiation process. So we should be actually very close for employee benefits. Purchase services are showing to be 77% expended. Supplies, 80% expended. Equipment, 75% expended. Food service, 57% expended. And community education, 48% expended. Our budget revision will be presented at the board meeting next month. If not sooner, we'll be working on it, as Jeff said, at the end of January into February. And I also have the ESST law was effective January 1st. So now all employees actually will have their ESST hours. We are meeting the requirements for it, but now they're going to show up on their paycheck, which is a state law. So now at the end of the month, we all have accruals for all our subs. So any sub that works, we have to provide 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked. So substitutes and coaches. So for everyone else, it will be front-loaded. For anyone else that's here as a substitute or just part-time, those accruals will happen through the payroll process. So I just have a little bit of programming to finish up, but Region 1 just did an update last week again, so everything's good on their end. So
Did you say 1 hour for every 30 they work?
1 hour for every 30 they work, yes.
How would they get paid on that? I mean, they must just do a draw one day and say, I'm gonna not come in, but I wanna get paid out my
Yes.
4 hours of sick leave?
Yes.
Cause you wouldn't bring them in if they're sick anyways, right?
And actually, there's a lot more programming too on that end. So for me, I can do it in payroll, but I also have to program it into Smart ER too. So now our subs go in and they enter their sick time.
Okay.
So I actually have a lot of programming on that end to do still.
So that's an added cost to the district as well.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely it is.
To any employer that has a part-time.
Coaches, I have
Yeah, if you didn't already.
hours programmed from years past, but we probably need to evaluate those, and that should probably done yearly just to make sure that we're recording the correct number of hours for all those positions.
Is this the state's idea or the Fed's idea?
This was the state passed last summer. It took a long time for the guidance and everything to be set, and there's still a lot of confusion on it.
Cause like coaches.
So, yes.
The substitute thing does puzzle me a little bit, because they wouldn't come in, you know, I mean, like,
They can be scheduled and they call it sick. And then
well, I
they
guess
schedule another
that could be
substitute and
a
just-
situation, but,
All right.
Yes.
you know, what if they're not scheduled, or what if they haven't been asked to come in?
Then they're still able to submit their sick leave to be paid.
Paid out.
This is unfunded. There isn't any way for me to specially code this in order to get more revenue, not like the unemployment, which was a mandate, which we already did get our revenue. So last summer, I submitted our unemployment expenses to the state, and we were already reimbursed for those. Actually, I believe only 80 or 90% of it. I mean, I think.
And it's dropping. You get,
But next year, we do not get any revenue for the summer unemployment.
yeah, so the first year, yeah, sure, but then the next year,
I
they're
think
like,
Best of luck.
they had talked to, I forget if it was you or Jeff who had mentioned it, and it's like, and you had asked some representative of the state or somebody else, it's like, well, how are we supposed to pay for it? And the state was basically like, I don't know, figure it out. So, thanks.
All sorts of good news tonight, huh?
So, any questions?
but, and those things, can you, when you're revising the budget, can you figure out those values and include that? How, I mean, you don't,
I'm going to have to.
you're gonna have to, right?
Oh, yeah, she'll have to put it somewhere.
I mean, thankfully, it's just from January 1 through,
Yeah.
you know what,
Yeah.
June. Any other questions?
Before you,
Just a, sort of a generalist question. You had said, Jeff, that you were hoping to get a community meeting, a finance meeting, because I'm getting questions from, from people, and I think they're interested in coming in and asking those questions about, but early February, I think is what I heard you say sometime.
No, I want to have a workshop for the school board.
Mhm. But
To
with
go
a
over the
public
budget.
invite.
Yes, it's open to the public.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would be a good use of our time to do questions and stuff. It's more, here's the information on the budget. here's our projection. I think we need to give it a process to look at where we're at, know exactly what we need to reduce before we start getting too wrapped up with who's getting cut or what are we doing. I mean, that will happen eventually.
Were you thinking more of a public forum?
I'm getting questions that I can't answer, you know, like where are you going, what are you doing for this? I mean, I think in general context, 50% of what we're looking at, that $1.1 million or the $1 million for round numbers, 50% of that is large one-time payments, you know, that went wrong somewhere. I mean, whether you want to start talking the insurance or the pool or the chiller, or, I mean, you know, it's stuff that I think the public is aware of, but I just want them to now know that, because if we start the cutting process, like you said, I think that then it looks like we're backtracking, which we are, but we have to cut. I think your number was fairly accurate, about $400,000.
I think it's going to be more than that now.
But again, my argument there, and I'm trying to look on the bright side of this, there's just a lot of one-time payments that,
what the one-time payments did for us is we've been able, because we've talked about the need to do some budget reductions, because this is not, we were on a trend where we were overspending $200,000-300,000 for several years, but we had a fund balance that kind of didn't bring the urgency when you have all these one-time payments that we've experienced over the last couple of years, and now we've depleted that cushion, and now those cuts are imminent and need to happen sooner than later. Does that make sense? I mean, that's there's always been a need, and as you know, if we would have had, the front line would have been more accurate last year when we were sitting in here in March saying, all right, and we had to make some tough cuts. When people lose their job, that's a tough cut. We probably should have went a little bit deeper then, had we had a clearer picture of where we were sitting financially.
But I think we're at that point also where, you know, you say there's a miracle. It really would be nice to not, you know, show up on the 1st of July and have to discuss going, you know, the SOD route. You know, I don't know if that's possible, but those one-time payments, like I said, you should push them to the side. You know, the insurance was gone, the chiller, it would have been nice to get ESSER funding for that. You know, the fuel costs should come down a little bit. I know you had a meeting with your department heads and just trying to get them, not just to look ahead at July 1st and say, what is it that we can tighten our belts on, but we need to tighten belts right now. You know, in terms of, and I know you said that, putting a freeze on spending, I mean, on just about anything. Do you get a monthly report back, and I'll use you, Seth, because you're unfortunate, you're sitting in the front row, that'll teach you. But do you report back to them on how your budget is, the status of your budget at the end of the month, like in the end of January and the end of February? And you say, okay, you know, now I'm struggling with this, or fuel costs got up, you know, because our transportation is in a bad spot.
No.
We did start sending monthly, which was really good idea.
Which is very helpful.
So the last 2 months, all supervisors get their expenditures. So once I complete month end, so everything is up to date, each supervisor gets their expenditure budget so they can see what we budget, where they're at, and what they have left, just to keep an eye on it. And you know, it's been great because even Sam went through and she's like, hey, some of this stuff from last year is not even, it was just coded, you know, wrong. So it's, I mean, I think it will help us to communicate better. Or Mary emailed because she found something on Friday, and I'm like, that's why we send this stuff out, so everyone looks at it, and they, you know, if they see something coded incorrectly, it's just good communication. So
it's a very important piece of the communication puzzle.
So that information is available.
Yep, and we met, we had one meeting on our subscriptions with IT and Mary, and for next year we're looking at, I can't remember what the final figure was, $25,000-30,000 just in different subscriptions that we're looking at reducing. We've had some staff reductions as far as from full-time to part-time already this year. There might be some more. But we will be meeting with each supervisor and going through where they're at and what are the absolute necessary things we need to get through this year, and looking at some of those restricted funds and spending those down. I think Seth's department is a huge one with LTFM. We have a couple $100,000 fund balance that we might have to start spending that down sooner to preserve our unassigned balance. So.
Okay, I mean, that's what I'm hoping, is just that it is now, it is not 6 months from now that we say, okay, that's where we, look over our shoulder. I think that you mentioned that earlier. I think we're past the point of looking to ascribe blame here. I think it's just, okay, let's move forward and make this thing work. Some real bad situations went down the last year. So now we move forward, and we're still talking about referendum, but I just want the public to be involved. And that's where I go to, let's say we do a board meeting, but I'm getting questions right now from people, who are asking about, well, what are you doing? What are you going to do to save that kind of money, or where did that money go? And to have that open conversation before the end of June, where now we say, okay, boy, that was a black year. 2023, 24 was tough on us. Let's start that process now.
I think we did take steps last spring, but the 5-year projection was not accurate.
Could you explain more what the auditor, her reasoning for the lower local tax levies? That doesn't make sense. Okay.
She said student enrollment.
No, it wasn't the student enrollment. That's the state. It's the tax.
I mean, my assumption, when you get more local taxes, the state aid reduces.
That's part of the equation. Maybe that is the answer.
Yeah,
For the
What's the answer?
For the local taxes, because I guess I know the state were funded off the number of students we have, and I guess I was thinking the local taxation. I think this is what she was referring to, that, okay, we want to tax at this amount, but the number of students works into that equation. So if you have fewer students,
Well, she said it was a 30-page formula. So
Yeah.
what in the formula changed
Yep.
Right.
that
And
brought
if
down
it
that
is
number?
the students, then that kind of makes sense,
And
sort of, maybe.
Going
And then when your tax
forward-
base gets bigger, you spread that same dollar amount over more, if you gain more properties, that are being
Less per
taxed, you're
person.
spreading it out farther.
As opposed to, and she not contradicted, but she held that up, opposed that to a more urban or a bigger school district where they were taxing based on the number of kids as opposed to the dollar amount. And I'm not sure I understand where's the threshold for that.
My understanding is there's a levy limitation that everyone can tax to. And
Yes, it's based on your market value,
Yeah,
But it's
and there's a formula
but it's
with
a
that.
dollar amount
Yep,
per
yes.
student, right?
Yep.
Isn't it like $705 per student?
That's probably one of the formula
That's one of the
pieces.
pieces of the formula. I don't know if you remember seeing it, but Sheena sent out.
It's on the levy certification
Yeah,
papers.
on that levy certification she sent out.
Is that
I
30-page
I tracked
formula?
some of those formulas, some of those numbers back, and it was very confusing, but it was there.
Yeah, so you have your referendum, market value that goes towards certain formulas for funding schools, and then you have your net tax capacity that generates funding for certain things. That might be something to bring to a workshop. There's a fact sheet on the market values and how they impact.
But really, it sounds like it's all out of our hands. Like it's nothing we can control.
Without going,
doing our
the
maximum.
biggest thing with schools, you have to go to the voters.
Yeah.
That's the unique thing with other government entities that that can raise taxes without having to have a vote to approve.
Give them a choice. They
Even
can have a
that-
referendum, or they can have more kids. Pick, it's their choice.
Right.
And even that amount per student has to go to the voters, right?
Well, because we can levy
No,
the max, but
yeah.
then we need
There's
to
a
vote
max.
for
Right.
beyond
You-
that.
Are you talking about the formula allowance
Yeah.
at this, that's set by legislators.
Yeah, but if we're gonna tax more than that.
If you're gonna go for an operating levy, that's a dollar amount per pupil usually.
Yes, in addition to
Right.
that,
Yep.
state levy.
Okay, I
So,
was quite the
Yep.
digression
I
of
think
that, so.
my message is that we have to make budget cuts before we go to the voters to ask for more money. I mean, we need to right that ship. Even if you went to the voters now, as soon as you can, we're not gonna get any of those dollars until FY '26. So there's no way to circumvent having to make some reductions based on our student numbers and the revenue that we're bringing in. It's just, and if you look at our revenue, that's been pretty close. We're 96,000 off on our revenue projection. It's really our expenses that we need to take a look at and address.
And even the line of credit is needed based on that delay in any
Yeah.
additional.
And I'm hoping we can shift more dollars to those fund balances and not push that, having to use those dollars down the road. But
Right.
I anticipate when we do the retro checks, there might be shortfall with cash. It's probably a 2-3 year process to get our fund balance heading in the right direction.
But you're planning on starting to work on that SOD process.
I'm gonna reach out to
Sooner rather than
MDE and just
later
let
to
them know,
make
I'm just
sure.
gonna tell them, I'm anticipating that by
Yeah.
June, we
I'm-
will be
I'm worried
in
about
SOD.
the end of this year. Yeah.
So we're gonna
I think that's a good idea.
start planning, and they have a good process. It's not fun to have them tell you what to do, but sometimes that's,
Basically, to me, that's a proactive approach, rather than waiting until June 30th, final results. And
No.
then, I mean, we just can't do that.
no.
So we've never had to do that before. We've never
No.
been in SOD.
Well, I don't know, maybe let me do some research. I know there's been some years back in the mid-90s maybe. We had some financial struggles. There was,
2000s was an allotment, and that was.
yeah, so we've gone through similar things in the past and come out okay, and we'll get through
I'm
this.
assuming that when Solvay made their big transition and went from like 200 plus employees to like 50 or something.
Yep, I would,
But they're not bringing the students into the school that they did in those years.
when I started here now we're really digressing, but we were a 3-section school in the elementary. And within, I don't know how many years, 5-6 years I was here, I was laid off because of budget reductions, because of the sharp decrease in student population.
I don't know if people know this, but this school was built for 1,200 kids.
Nine.
Yep.
It was built for 1,200, but there were 900 kids at the time. But
Okay.
the school was designed for 1,200 kids.
So we have a lot
Anyway,
of
I
square
had heard
footage.
9, but anyway,
Yep.
it was based on, they thought they had 9, we have half that.
Yep.
now. Yeah.
That also hurts with the LTFM because it's based on per pupil. too.
Right,
And the building's not getting smaller.
right,
Yeah, or
yeah.
Thank you, Sheena.
Thank you, Sheena.
We got any other board presenters?
Was Seth
Was that
gonna say
Seth,
something?
yes, so let's hear from Seth.
the first thing we can start with was with the daycares, what's going on with that. Does everybody know the history of why we're going through what we're going through? Is it relevant?
You could recap,
Yeah.
maybe for
Sure.
everybody listening.
So we had a state fire marshal inspection, and what we found out is an education building is classified as an E-type building. and not usually a big deal. We brought the daycares in. This new fire marshal that came in has been through this before. With the daycares that we have here in a Class E building, you can only have an aggregate total of five under 2.5-year-olds in the building regardless of the square footage. That was something that was new that we had no idea about. So right now we're working on trying to rectify that with keeping the daycares in. We're working on changing the classification to an I-4. And what that involves is the building code is
You mean the
different.
building classification? with
No.
the I-4, or-
It will still be a Class E, but where the daycares are, that will be classified, the safety portion of it will be under an I-4 regulation. There's where the difference is.
Is that what the fire marshal is requesting?
Yes, exactly. So what that requires is for a Class E, we're actually overprotected with the sprinkler system we have. With an I-4, we need to add where the exits are, extra smoke detectors for early detection to get the 2.5-year-olds out faster. So that's where that kind of comes around a little bit, and it put us in a little bit of a bind. So I've been working with Joanna, Sherry, and Jody really, really closely on how to get that. I've been working with Jeff hand in hand on this. We're finally to the point where I got it scheduled. They ordered the parts this morning, and they're going to start working on when they can come in to get it done. They're looking at the beginning of February to get everything up and going. Talked with Jeff this morning. We're looking at Safe Schools to fund that for now, and then reimburse all the money that's raised through Rotary Foundation, the county, and I know I'm missing a couple other ones. These girls have been working yeah, there's probably a lot of them that I don't even know. These are the ones that I know. And so it looks like when I talked to Jody last Thursday, they were pretty confident they had the whole cost covered. It's just a matter of when we're going to get it in. We have a deadline date of March 17th to have everything in place. That was the deadline we had.
The daycares have to close if we don't.
Correct. Yep. So it's been a pretty tough project, but it's up and going, and it looks like we're going to get it done, and we're going to get it done before. Once we get everything in place, then also there's one daycare that's waiting to start. She can start right away. So that's going to be a big plus. If something happens where after I leave and it's still not finished, I am committed to get this done regardless wherever I'm at. You know, Jeff's got me on speed dial. He told me I get to keep my number just in case. So, any questions on that? I know it's kind of a quick explanation. If you see Jody, Sherry, Joanna, I mean, those girls have been working their butts off to make this happen. Make sure you tell them great job on that.
Thanks for your work on it too.
Oh, yeah. And then, so the next one, kind of Jeff touched on a little bit, we had a building and grounds committee to kind of talk about the transition, what's going to happen once I leave. So my end date is going to be February 29th this year because of leap year. So I've been working very hard with my crew. I've been working with Jeff, and I've been working with we had a meeting with the Buildings and Grounds Committee. So far, what we're looking at is the crew has stepped up way beyond what I could even imagine. They've been coming to me and saying, hey, can I take this on? Dale wants to take on everything on the building. You know, looking at like the roof. He knows everything mechanical in here. He's worked with all the vendors. He wants to take that. He asked me to take that on. And it's like, absolutely. That's one piece that takes off Jeff's plate and helps the transition a lot more. Kyle is another one. He came up. He's going to take on all the supply ordering. He stepped up. Since he started Masmus, he kind of has his feet wet a little bit in the process, and he just wants to go forward with that. So that's another piece of the pie that's been covered. And then I talked with John this morning, and John mentioned about taking over the payroll. You know, I do that all the time. And John's like, I'm doing it anyways, I'll take that piece on. So that's another whole thing that
I know,
takes.
I'm like, yay.
She likes it. John's OCD.
Yeah, no, it is. These guys, I mean,
Who does the snow plowing?
we have that contract with
I know,
CCN,
but
during
who's
the day.
contact with that?
That would be me. So that's
Okay.
gonna be translated either to Jeff or John.
Okay.
John, because
That was-
it's related to
it was one of the things you
transportation.
mentioned the other
Yes,
day.
yep. It would just make sense. John does it because he's gotta take care of transportation anyways. So there's a few little odds and ends to fill in, you know, if Larry's gone, who's gonna cover for him if we have inclement weather during the school, but, I went to lunch today, was walking out, and I looked out and the plow truck's going. So I walked over there, here's Dale, he's getting everything cleaned up. I go, what are you doing? He goes, I don't know, just felt like being quiet for a little bit. So these guys are, the crew that's in place right now and the programs we got going, I gotta say, I've never worked with a crew that's as tight and as responsible as what we have going right now. I really feel confident in walking away and things not failing, going on just like they have been. So,
One thing I will add is the guys that he mentioned, we'd probably do like weekly or bi-weekly team meetings, leadership meetings, kind of like what we do with the transportation department, and that's really made things work much smoothly. So
yeah,
that's kind of the model we're gonna try until this spring when we make a final decision for the following year.
yeah. One of the things that we did talk to, and I think Jeff's is gonna work on it if he hasn't already, is that get it up on Masmus to post the job. So the group Masmus is buildings and grounds directors, supervisors, leads throughout Minnesota. That covers 99% of all the schools throughout Minnesota. That's gonna be a huge place to put the application because you might look at guys that are experienced, young guys that wanna move up. Might have guys that have 5-10 years left that wanna retire up here. They'll come in, wanna come up there. These are all people that have knowledge and skills in that trade. So that's gonna be a very, very big one, besides local too. You know, I'm gonna put it out there. I don't know, is that it? I don't know if I hit everything, but.
Well, we still got 4 or 5 weeks to.
Absolutely, we do.
Get it all
We got a lot of
so,
time to get things in place. I've been working really, really hard on doing that. Getting a lot of lists together, different vendors, who to contact, when to contact, who takes care of what, stuff like that. So when I leave, it's just everything's in a binder, open it up, and it's just a phone call away. And then, you know, like my guys, I keep telling them, said I might be gone, but I got my phone on me 24/7. So I'll be here to do that. And these guys, I said, I feel confident that these guys stepped up. It's just gonna keep on going just fine. So, any questions? No?
Thank you, Seth.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
We'll see you at next month's meeting before you leave.
I might be, it depends on when it is. It's on the 23rd, I'll be in Texas.
Oh.
It'll be the 22nd, I think.
I should be here.
Okay.
No, never mind, cancel that. That's March. I didn't even look to see what it was.
If I'm not in Texas,
It's the
I'll be
4th
here.
or the 3rd.
Fourth.
The 4th. It's the 26th.
I did nothing
February
formal.
is the 4th Monday.
Mary's did the one I can play thing.
Okay.
Yeah, for the sake of time.
In that case, I think we'll adjourn the working session unless somebody's got anything else. At 7:32, you guys need a break or should we go right into the board? Hearing no complaints. Find my trip sheet. There we go. I'll call it to order at 7:32 and we'll go with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I heard there were changes in the agenda, or what, or is the agenda good to go as is?
I think it's good. We were just missing some documentation,
Okay.
but Jeff got it to us.
Okay.
Those two resolutions.
In that case, I'm gonna call for a motion second to approve the January 22nd, 2024 meeting agenda.
Motion by Lyon.
I'll second.
Second, that was.
By Robita.
Robita.
Sorry.
Any discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do we have any board presenters? No. Written communications? No. Old business? No. Then we'll go on to new business. Need a motion a second to approve the December 18th, 2023 school board meeting minutes and the January 8th, 2024 organizational meeting minutes.
Ellis, I'll make that a motion.
Motion by Ellis.
Second by Lyon.
Second by Lyon. Anyone want to discuss that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Need a motion and a second to approve the invoices, financial statements, bank reconciliation, wire transfers, and purchase card statement.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Sonstagard,
I'll second.
second by Ellis. Is that Ellis or Trask?
It's Ellis.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
She did suggest that as board members, we get our noses in this more often, you know, in terms of the finances. I'm not sure I'm that guy, but isn't that what I heard from the auditor was, I mean, feel free to contribute to help. So like I said, I'm not sure if you want me in there, but you know, the finance committee, be vocal. I think that's what she's saying, at least for checks and balances, right? Mm-hmm. So something like that comes up and we tend to rubber stamp this fairly easily, but start looking at invoices more and see if we can't pinch some pennies.
Anyone else? Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The approval of personnel, resignation, retirements, and appointments. I need a motion and a second to approve the resignation and appointments as presented. First, resignations. Courtney Bordelon. Okay, high school teacher. Kathy Wayman, bus driver, and Seth Putz, building ground supervisor.
Robita will make the motion.
I'll second that.
Motion by Robita, second by Ellis. Any discussion?
Just to thank you, I guess.
Yeah,
Kathy Weeman's coming back, it looked like in the letter, so.
Yep.
Or would like to come back.
Yep.
So if we don't approve Seth's resignation, he can't go, can he?
I was wondering that myself.
Okay, just pointing that out, so.
And I can deny his trip to Texas.
You have to answer my boss.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Need a motion second to approve the final audit report year end June 30th, 2023. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Second by Sonstagard. Gotta get a motion in there at some point anyway. So, any discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Need a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2023/2024-23 directing the superintendent to make recommendations for adjustments in curriculum, programs, and staff for the 2024-2025 school year.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ellis.
Second by Lyon.
Second by Lyon. Any discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Need a motion second to adopt resolution 2023/24-24 authorizing the district to enter into a line of credit agreement with Border Bank. I'll make that motion.
Second by Lyon.
Second by Lyon. Discussion?
The only thing I would mention, it was mentioned at the finance committee that this amount is the amount is based on their approval. We're hoping they'll approve that much.
Yep.
The mayor. That might come back to be revisited or amended, the resolution. Then we do a new resolution, or would we amend?
We would have to do that, yeah, and we hopefully won't need to do it.
Right, but I mean,
Prior to
that's,
the
I
next
just
meeting,
wanted to
yeah.
make the rest of the board aware of that.
What kind of interest do you pay on that?
It's in the resolution, I think it's 7% and
20 or quarter.
a quarter percent for origination or whatever the term they use for that. So,
Any more discussion? All in favor, was it, is that your,
You had a motion in a second.
Yep.
Yes.
all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Any other business? Going once, going twice. We'll call the meeting adjourned at 7:39.
I'm sorry about the work, I must not have communicated with
And I need 3 from you.
Did we sign that one or something, or is that just, they had signature blocks on it?